Welcome back to the latest episode of the CGA Tour podcast. As always here, I'm your host, Calvin Glen Alexander. And tonight I am joined by Ryan Flaspoler, or Flash, as I know him from back in the fraternity house days. Flash, how's it going, man?
Good, Calvin. How's it going?
Doing good, doing good. What are you up to these days? Living in Dallas, DFW area?
Yep, living in Dallas. I moved here. Oh gosh, so I graduated in 2017, moved here right after that. Taught for a year, and now I'm in recruiting. So, enjoying it down here, and Yep. What about you? I know
Well,
you've been moving around a
awesome.
little bit.
Yeah, I moved all over the country a couple times, so I try to keep it kind of stay in the same area here for hopefully at least more than 20 months at a time now. But coming up on that here soon. I've lived down in San Diego, worked for the Padres, lived in Detroit, worked for the Pistons, then lived in Oklahoma City a little bit during COVID, and now living back out here in LA, working for an NFL team that had a better record than the other NFL team this year. In case anyone wants to narrow down some a little bit, the one that Zach Robinson may coach for here in the future, or I'd want him to as an Oklahoma State grad, but who knows if he will or not. So
Yep.
I don't have any of that inside info, unfortunately. I wish I did.
Yeah. No, that'd be nice. That'd be nice. Not be nice if he would come back to Oklahoma State at some point too. So.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what we want to do. Is I always see you, basically, getting a little bit active on Twitter, social media, that type of stuff, asking some questions about Oklahoma State football, basketball, maybe a little baseball I've seen as well. But tonight we want to talk about basically Oklahoma State football here. See what changes you would make if you could, and go from there. So, with that being said, I don't think the offense did as good this year as we wanted to, clearly. Especially down the stretch at the end there. There are multiple things with Oklahoma State football that we could just start off with, but I kind of want to start with the offensive route. That's something that, as an Oklahoma State fan, lifelong, I know you're as well. The offense was like our bread and butter coming up under Gundy, and it was like, oh my gosh, this 2011 team is incredible. This 2012 team, still pretty good. 13, 14, kind of a little bit dip, and then once Mason Rudolph came back in the end of 2014, we're off to the races again for quite a while. But at the end of the day, a lot of fun. So want to ask you here, if you could make some offensive changes here in the coaching staff, get an offensive coordinator, have a wish list put together. Let's say it's not Casey Dunn this next year, or maybe even if it is, who are you choosing for next season?
Yeah, that's a good question, and yeah, I feel like that's what Oklahoma State football is kind of known for the last 10, 15 years has been the high flying Gundy offenses. So, I mean, if it was up to me, if I was making the hiring decisions at OSU, I would love to get a big name like a Cliff Kingsbury. I hear he's out of a job right now, but sounds like he's also out of the country. But I think a more realistic offensive coordinator that I like to see, someone that's been at the university a little bit, and I've seen his name a little bit over Twitter and things like that. But Marcus Arroyo, he'd be my top choice. I know he was at Oklahoma State in 2015. I think he was running backs coach. I know he did some pretty good recruiting for us from what I saw. I know he got Justice Hill, a couple other guys like that, and I know he also just got let go from UNLV, um, which was kind of surprising. I mean, he took that program from winless to 5-7 within 2 or 3 seasons, which I mean I think that's pretty impressive. But and he was also like he was the offensive coordinator for Oregon when they went to the Rose Bowl a few years back. So he'd be my top choice for sure.
Yeah, I got to say his recruiting efforts alone make me want him to come back to Oklahoma State
Yeah.
just because of how many good guys he was attached to. He was attached to Rudolph a little bit there for I think a couple, a little bit is the key word there. But yeah,
Yeah.
Justice Hill, Chuba Hubbard, he was attached with a little bit too, and recruiting him. And then Casey Dunn's really the guy who recruits the wide receivers. But as far as the quarterbacks, I know Mason Rudolph had spoken a lot about him in press conferences about how much he liked Arroyo as well. And knowing how our offense is, it seems like towards the end here, Gundy didn't love the dual threat offensive quarterback in Spencer Sanders and really loved to go more of a pro style offense. I don't even know if that's what we're going to do this year, but kind of getting back to those ways, I definitely agree with the Arroyo. If Dunn was let go or some changes were made there, then I would say probably Arroyo too. But As far as Dunn goes, I would love to see Dunn still be the OC and have a quarterback healthy for a whole season. I don't know if that's too much to ask for, but it seems like when he can have a quarterback healthy for a whole season, I mean, I know in 2021 that was mainly a defensive year for us, but still, Spencer Sanders seemed like he was banged up all the time and couldn't stay healthy, which not necessarily fault at him, but just kind of how things work, and just kind of luck at the draw there on how health goes. Love to see Casey Dunn have a full healthy quarterback room at least for a year. Not have to play a true freshman in Rangel or a preferred walk on in Gundy. So at the end of the day, I mean, I'm not dissing the guy. I mean, he's a preferred walk on who went 12-1 in the state of Oklahoma his senior year of high school football. But then again, we also saw he played in games and also saw what his other recruiting options were too. So he didn't have, he wasn't choosing
Mhm.
Oklahoma State over Georgia, right? So I don't think I'm breaking news there, but that'd be one as well here too. What kind of things would you like to see like the offense do next year? Would you like to get back more of the kind of the airing it out ways, or kind of the RPO system that we were doing here with Sanders, where it's a run pass option with his ability to run the ball too?
Yeah, that's a good question too. I think we kind of hit our ceiling with the RPO offense that we've been running with Sanders. We had some good games, but kind of missed the explosiveness. I mean, we had some pretty high scoring games last year. I know we put up 63 on TCU, put up 55 on Kansas, which but I feel like looking back at those highlights, a lot of it was due to the run game. I think we need to figure out how to get the run game going. That's the key. That's a big key for next year. I mean, this was I think the worst running offense that we've had under Mike Gundy in the last 17 years that he's been here. So I think that's kind of the big key. I've also seen we've gotten a lot of tight ends in the portal, so getting them involved. I'm not really sure. You know, w- I know they like to call them the cowboy backs and things like that, but I just feel like they've kind of not been used. I mean, you look at Jelani Woods, who I mean, he's the biggest example that I can think of with the not using the tight ends the way you want. Um, he goes to Virginia and just lights up the ACC. Now he's in the NFL, lighting up NFL defenses, and so I'd like to see number one the run game get going for our backs. Maybe change up the blocking scheme, and I'd also like to see tight ends get involved.
Yeah, for sure. I would love to see us air it out again. Get back to the older Oklahoma State ways, because honestly, those were a lot of fun to watch with a bunch of jump balls and the receivers having to basically figure out the ball midair from Rudolph, but Rudolph was incredible throwing the deep ball. It seems like that's what Dunn really wanted to do, especially in the bowl game when it was, there's the only thing that bad can happen in a bowl game is injuries that could sustain for more than an offseason. And seeing him air out the ball a couple different times to Johnson and other guys who were, at the time were on the team at least, but other guys who are still on the team, airing out to those guys, it seems like that's kind of what we need to get back to a little bit more. We did bring in some slot receiver transfers, which I like a lot as well too, because those guys are, you would think, a little bit more of the speedy guys on the outside who could play similar to James Washington there. But to your point, we did bring in a couple of different transfers at tight end. We have a full running back room, even with a guy transferring to us and then transferring away from us still while being a transfer. We still have a full running back room though. At the end of the day, that guy was going to be the fourth string running back. If he's on the
Hmm.
roster. And so it's like, all right, like let's figure it out. But to your point, I think we're bringing those tight ends so we can play a little more jumbo sets. We can play a little bit more. I'm saying probably a bunch of terms I don't necessarily know the full meaning of, but a lot more personnel on the field, right? So that we can run the ball more aggressively and really try to run out the clock. When I think about Gundy's time at OSU and I'm watching a film of it, well, he had the two best running backs ever to see the field in Oklahoma or Oklahoma State, or maybe even college football, and Thurman Thomas and, of course, Barry Sanders. So, with that being said, Gundy's used to running the ball when he played, and he's used to having decent running backs when he's been a coach as well too. I mean, we can go back to Kendall Hunter, probably even back before then a little bit, Vernon Morency, who played for the Broncos for a while. And then most recently here, of course, you got Chuba Hubbard, NFL running back, Justice Hill, NFL running back, Jalen Warren, NFL running back. So we've got a good line of those guys, and I'd love to see us do something there in that fashion. I just, for whatever it is, we cannot figure out a way to run block. We just cannot figure out a way to run block at all whatsoever. We can pass block a little bit, but even that's a little sketchy, and that's why I think Sanders got dinged up from time to time. Seems like we had okay, we've got Josh Sills. He's here at Oklahoma State. When he was out and he missed snaps or whatever, and he got injured, it was an easy to tell difference. Same thing with Preston Wilson this past season here as well too. Another guy who's a key on the O line who Wilson is coming back, so that's always good to see. And we did get some offensive lineman transfers in as well too. But yeah, to kind of your point, love to see us be able to run the ball effectively because then at least the defense has to play a little bit back, you know?
Yep.
I mean, it's one of those things where we are a really good team most of the time when we have the ability to run and pass the ball. And I mean, that's true for any team in the Big 12, but we're going to
Mhm.
see new schedule changes. We might go to BYU, we might go to Houston, might go to UCF, or might go to Cincinnati, or two of those four might come to us. I don't know what's going on with the Big 12 schedule. That's something I'm really curious to see. How can we make sure that OU and Texas both have to play each of those schools on the road and back to back weeks and really screw them over with the schedule? Because I'm sure that's what's being at least thought of right now, unless they want to agree to a buyout and that gives the Big 12 more money and hopefully some way that trickles down effect comes to Oklahoma State. But yeah, there's a lot of things that I'd like for us to see us do offensively that we didn't do the past couple of years. And I think Sanders kind of hamstrung us a little bit because he was so good, four-star recruit, Gatorade Player of the Year coming out of high school, and he just he lived up to the hype and the fact that he got us to the Big 12 championship, he won us a Fiesta Bowl, etc. But man, that guy's career is gonna be one of those things where if he had stayed healthy the entire time, maybe we win two Bedlam games. Maybe we win the Big 12 championship completely that year. And I think he was healthy in that game. It's just maybe we win two Big 12 championships. There's just so many maybe and what ifs if he had been healthy that can be fun to play in 5 years from now. But yeah, to your point, we can run the ball a little bit more effectively than we have been previously. That'd be nice. Be nice.
Yeah,
Especially this past
absolutely.
season was definitely a breakaway from that too.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like Sanders was the run game last year. And yeah, just like you mentioned earlier, I mean, it's hard to open up the passing game and hard to throw the deep shots down the field and things like that when the defense isn't respecting the run. It just seemed like when we were passing the ball, it was just so hard to get a first down sometimes because our receivers were just covered. And because I mean, defenses didn't really need to come up and so I don't know. I will say I think this is a good thing, but it sounds like most of the O line should be coming back next year. I know Cole Birmingham, he's supposed to be coming too. I know he was injured, didn't play any of 2022. So, and I feel like Jason Brooks, kind of at the end of the season, he started to kind of come along a little bit. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. Would love to see some improvement in O line and yeah, and get the running backs involved. I think Ollie Gordon. I think he could be something special. I think he could be, um, remembered as a Justice Hill or a Chuba Hubbard if we can figure out the O line and figure out how to run block for him. So
Yeah, I forget if it was the Iowa State or the West Virginia game, but I want to say it was the West Virginia game where it was
hmm
raining. Sometimes it was a trench downpour. Sometimes it wasn't. Rangel was starting the quarterback. And it was kind of like, why don't we try to run the ball more often? What's the deal here? Why are we not
yeah,
running the ball? And then all of a sudden it was like, okay, let's try to run the ball. And then it was with Desmond Jackson, who I think was the A&M transfer. There's
yep,
Desmond, there's several different guys who have like the same initials, but I was like, oh, okay, well, that's not really doing that great. And all of a sudden it was, well, hey, Ollie Gordon can try to run it, right? And gave it to him a couple times, and oh my gosh, that made a huge difference, and it almost helped us win the game. Of course, it didn't end up at the end of the day, but that was one of the games where you go, okay, you got a true freshman quarterback making his third ever start or whatever it was at the time, and then you've got a just terrible playing condition, try to throw the ball in. So let's try to run the ball. Let's try to run the ball every single way we can. And then it seemed like Ollie Gordon eventually helped us out. But that being said, there is one open position in the coordinator spot that we can definitely talk about. And that's defensive coordinator. So at least as when we're recording this on Monday, January 22nd, or January 23rd, excuse me. There's no defensive coordinator on staff for Oklahoma State. Previous defensive coordinator has taken a leave from coaching, it sounds like, for a little bit here. So, who would you like to see be the DC? Would it be in house or kind of get from outside of the program?
Yeah, and did you see any of the Twitter rumors last week about Jim Knowles possibly coming back? Did you see any of that?
I did, and I don't know how quickly I could put those to rest other than just why? Why would he? I mean, that'd be cool, but like
Yeah.
Jim Knowles might come back to be a head coach. I mean, he might take the promotion, but as far as we know, Gundy's not leaving, and I couldn't see any way Jim Knowles would come back. I mean, could you? I mean,
No,
maybe a money thing, but I don't know why he would necessarily either.
Yeah, I don't really see him coming back. I got a text that day. I can't remember. I think it was maybe Wednesday last week, saying it was from a buddy from our fraternity saying Jim Knowles is coming back, and man, I got super excited. Went told my dad that Jim Knowles is coming back, and then I looked on Twitter, and yeah, next day that was pretty much it. Didn't hear anything after that. So I'm assuming that was just all rumors and not happening. But would love if I could just pick any defensive coordinator would be Knowles, obviously. But yeah, I think there's a couple guys I think I would like to see. It would probably be, and it's hard to guess who Gundy's going to actually hire because I feel like you can throw all these names out there and then he's going to find some guy that from a school that you probably don't know a whole lot about their football program, and then he's going to bring him in and he's going to be pretty good. I feel like Gundy over the years has been pretty good at hiring coordinators, but a couple guys I was looking at, I know Doug Belk out of Houston. He's had a couple really good defenses there the last 2 years, and that's in a conference, the American Conference, where that they are known for some pretty high flying offenses, and I believe he had a top 20 defense the last 2 years. Or somebody I was also seeing this name out of James Madison, Bryant Haynes. I know they just bumped up to the FBS level last year, and he had a couple of really good seasons. He was I guess the co-defensive coordinator at James Madison for 2 years, I believe, and then he just became the full time defensive coordinator. And they've had some really good defenses. Someone like that would be great. I feel like that would be kind of up Gundy's alley too, of someone that you don't really know. It's not a household name yet, but Gundy kind of finds him out of nowhere. But I think honestly, most realistically, I think Joe Bob Clemens. I think he'll probably be promoted up to DC if I had to put money on it. He's been with the program I think for 10 years now, and he sounds like him and Gundy have a great relationship, and I think that kind of goes a long way with Gundy's decisions. Someone that's loyal to the program, and someone that wants to be there long term. And it sounds like the players like him too. So I believe he called the plays in the Fiesta Bowl as well, which first half was a little rough, but second half they definitely made some adjustments. So that's who I think will be the new DC. But what do you think, Calvin?
It's too funny you say that about Doug Belk because I actually had typed out here in the outline a little bit and put down some notes that he arrived with Holgerson in 2019, and then his rebuild on the defense side for Houston was staggering. By year three in 2021, the Cougars declined from 119th in the nation scoring defense to number 19 as of last year. So Doug Belk, I think I'm with you there. Seemed like a guy that Gundy could go out and hire. What I would love to see personally is just a guy like Derek Mason, another guy that comes from another Power Five conference that maybe he's not in the best situation overall for him stylistically, but wants to come in and basically coach up our guys. I mean, Derek Mason is, when I put down like, best defensive coordinators and Google it, Derek Mason was number 3 last year as like just ranking in a couple different, basically just websites who are just ranking guys. There's not much to it besides it said Derek Mason was previously at Stanford, then at Auburn, then Vanderbilt head coach, then Auburn, then Oklahoma State. Um, the guy that I would like to see here is, maybe that makes more sense right now too, is Kurt Maddox from San Diego State. In 2 seasons with the Aztecs, both the defense have finished number 11 and number 16 in the nation in scoring defense. And that's something where it kind of brings back that whole like bend don't break mentality from Glenn Spencer days a little bit, and kind of Jim Knowles too, where it,
Hmm.
it was, oh, you would score 45, but if we could just hold him to 45, it was kind of like that's crazy. We're talking about holding a team to 45 points. That's 6 touchdowns, but also it's like, well, but then we get the interception that, maybe should have gone our way when Parrish Cox gets it, excuse me, or AJ Green, etc. previously there. Um, and I think it'll be Joe Bob Clements at the end of the day. I think we'll be an in-house guy because honestly, it's almost the end of January. Players can no longer enter the portal as of last week. So at least for that time of the year, they can no longer enter the portal. I think they can again before the start of the season. But January 18th, the portal closed at least for like the winter time period or the offseason time period there. So I think now Oklahoma State can really focus in on okay, who's going to be the defensive coordinator this year, and hopefully we keep him for a couple of years because that's what it lets your team get better and better over years. If you can keep him for just a couple of years, I'm not saying we have to keep a defensive coordinator like Glenn Spencer, where he almost overstays his welcome.
Hmm.
To put it nicely, where it goes from being awesome to oh okay, not as great. But, Kurt Maddox out of San Diego State, a guy who's not in a Power 5 program, who may want to move to a Power 5 program, kind of coach up his guys, have control over basically his own scheme, everything like that. San Diego State does get a lot of guys into that are Polynesian or from Hawaii or from other areas of the country where you go, oh my gosh, that dude is huge and he moves extremely well. A bunch of the guys who have a name that's way too long for me to even try to pronounce with way too many vowels in it that's from Hawaii. Those are the guys that show up in San Diego State uniforms or Oregon or they stay local in Hawaii or whatever it may be. And I'd love to see us get some guys in like that because you know what? I think we just had a guy who I cannot pronounce his last name, no matter how many times I tried on defense this year, who just transferred out of the program. But we're gonna
Samuela.
need some help on defense. Yeah, I mean, we defense is thinning out a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think for the record, our corners have been extremely good or halfway decent for the most part, and so our cornerbacks coach just kind of provides you a little bit different of an idea. Love to see Tim Duffy, be promoted to DC. He's been with OSU now for 10 years. He's coached for 23. He's had All Pro corners and AJ Green, Parrish Cox, who I already mentioned, and several others as well too, who I mean, Duffy joined the staff in March 2013 and then became quarterbacks coach after coaching the safeties in 13 and 14. So, 5 of his 9 years on staff resulted in 10 win seasons for the Cowboys. So that is a nice way of saying 5 of the last 10 years we've had 10 wins and love to get
Hmm.
back to that as quickly as possible. But then again, I mean, Rodarius Williams was a guy who was like, oh my gosh, that guy's electric. And he was key in recruiting him.
Yep.
At the end of the day, I think recruiting is something that this team really and the whole program really needs to focus on a lot more. So I'd love to see our best recruiters get promoted. And that's nothing on Joe Bob Clements. He may have recruited a bunch of our great D line guys, and I may just be too blind to see it because I was focused on the corners a little bit more as a contrast because I know Joe Bob Clements is like the name thrown out more or less more
Yep.
often. But I mean, if we had gotten like Dax Hill, you know, if we
Hmm.
gotten Justice Hill's brother when he was in state, wanted to apparently at least try to get recruited, but every Oklahoma State fan was like, I don't know. And then Gundy like didn't do the whole Jim Harbaugh thing where he didn't fly in on a helicopter to one of his games in Tulsa and all show off the whole entire state. Because he was like, because Gundy, I think, was just like, hey, this guy's not even putting us in his top five. Like, what are we doing? Right? Like, why spend resources here? But all that being said, I think Duffy would have been or Duffy would be a great guy to promote. I mean, when I go back through here, his pupils, sophomore safety Jordan Stearns became the Oklahoma State underclassman to record 100 tackles in a season. Um, I mean, it's just this guy who he's not to break kind of the mold for Oklahoma State fans. He's didn't play at Oklahoma State. He's not from Oklahoma, as far as I can understand here. He played at Texas Tech, and now he's been in Stillwater for 10 years. So he's one of those guys where if you can keep him on staff and for 10 years, maybe promoting him could only bring us in better recruits. Or maybe it's co-DCs next year with him and Joe Bob Clemens and we're off to the races. But I know Duffy does do a ton with recruiting and recruiting's I think the key deal here. If we can if we can recruit a little bit better, then you know what? Then maybe we can hit on a little bit better years as well. Just because it seems like this one bad year is now, I don't know, taking us a turn for the turn away from where we wanted to be at least. So it's a weird deal there.
Yeah, definitely. I think unfortunately we picked a bad time to go 7-6 and lose 6 out of the last 7 games. Just with the portal being as crazy as it is, NIL, all that crazy stuff. Yeah, I think if we have this season 10 years ago, I think we kind of, obviously we don't lose as many players, but yeah, I would agree. I do like Tim Duffy. We've had some really good corners. I think going into this past season, I think everybody that's what we were worried about was the secondary, and we thought the D line was going to be dominant, and it kind of ended up being the opposite at the end of the season. We kind of struggled to stop the run. We still had guys like Brock Martin and Colin Oliver that could get after the quarterback, but I mean some of these other teams were kind of running all over us. But I mean we had some guys like Kendall Daniels and Jamar Muhammad who could make plays in the secondary, and really wish we could have kept Jabbar Muhammad. I think he was special. I think that's, in my opinion, that's probably our biggest loss as a program to the transfer portal this year. He played out of his mind. So
Him and Mason Cobb. Mason
yeah,
Cobb saw every snap for I think almost 6 straight games, and it's so
yep,
hard to do that when you're at that position, when you're playing, middle linebacker kinda there,
hmm
so, yeah, both those guys are gonna be key losses that we have in this next upcoming season. Curious to see how Cobb does in the Pac-12 just because the Pac-12 is a bunch more of the air raid and scoring offenses, and USC couldn't stop, to put it nicely, they couldn't stop a nosebleed last year. They definitely couldn't stop a running game in Utah. So I'm curious to see how Cobb does this next season. But Jabbar Mohabit also going to the Pac-12. Curious to see how he does, lining up at Washington there too. But yeah, I just what I would have loved to see us hold on to a couple more of those guys on the defensive side and just see us lose a bunch
hmm
of offensive guys because it seems like okay, that was what's going to happen. That I want to ask you here a little bit about the Trace Ford deal, though.
oh yeah,
So Trace Ford leaves. You have this Gottlieb. Gottlieb tweets at him. Then there's an article written in the Oklahoman about Trace Ford, which I don't know if you've read the Oklahoman or remember reading it or so, but it's been very pro OU based. I mean, just to put everyone's mind all at detention, the
hmm
Gaylord Oklahoman and the Gaylord University of Oklahoma football field, Memorial Stadium. So those are connected. It's the same family who sponsors both. One owns a newspaper and one sponsors a football stadium. It's like if T-Bone Pickens sponsored the Oklahoman, it'd be the same kind of deal.
yep,
But with that being said, the article was not pro OSU, and a bunch of the quotes are from Trace Ford, and he did not dispute them. So I'm not saying that OU wrote, that OU wrote this article, put them in the best light or whatever. I just always have that in the back of my mind whenever it's an OSU fan growing up, and that's not winning Bedlam every year. I'm always going to remember that. But what did you think about Trace Ford leaving? Because from my standpoint, real quick, he played like a couple of snaps, and I wish he had been healthier more often. But that's
hmm
kind of it. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it's a huge. Yeah, it's always great to have those guys line up on your side of the field versus the opponents. And I wish he hadn't transferred in conference. We've been much happier seeing him leave the conference because we don't have to see him again. And I
hmm
feel like he will have a sack this year in the Bedlam game, and we'll be like, "Oh gosh, you gotta be kidding me." But besides that, I wish the guy the best, but he just wasn't healthy enough for him to make a huge impact for our team, especially this last year.
yeah. And when Trace Ford was on the field, man, he was dangerous. I mean, I mean, not only was he getting sacks, I mean, he also had a couple of big bat down the ball at the line of scrimmage type plays this year. But I agree with you. I definitely can just imagine this year's Bedlam, him getting after Rangel or Bowman, whoever's playing quarterback at that point, and us just feeling like, oh man. But yeah, it's really hard for me to be excited for him to go to OU. I guess I kind of get it. I mean, I get why he was leaving. I get why he's transferring. He had some really bad luck with injuries the last couple years, and a lot of guys like that. Yeah, it makes sense to go try another team, see if you can get some more NFL exposure. Because at the end of the day, this is a really violent game. They're putting their bodies on the line, and I mean, some players it takes one play and your whole career's done. So I get why he's leaving. He wants to try something else, and elevate his draft stock. But man, it's going to be really hard for us to feel good about him, his legacy at OSU being that he's the one that went to Oklahoma. And man, out of all the schools, Trace, why did you have to pick OU? I wanted to root for you, man. You could have gone to TCU, you could have gone to Texas Tech, even. I mean, but OU is that's tough. It's tough. So I get it, but at the same time, it's kind of stings a little bit to lose a player to your rival.
Yeah, it always does. And it will. I I almost wish the guy had just waited. Could he have waited one more year to transfer when OU probably moves at that point to the SEC? We don't see him. I don't think he could have. I think all of his eligibility is up after this year. But hats off to him. I hope that his, fellow, I think they both went to Edmond North, if I have that right. Colin Oliver, I hope his other guy he was sharing the same side of the field with for a little bit has more sacks in Bedlam game this year than he does. But yeah, that's
Hmm.
honestly just a personal thing, just because of course we want Oklahoma State to win. So and nothing against him necessarily personally, but of course professionally, wish he had definitely picked a different school. Um,
Yeah,
with,
definitely.
with that being said, here the Big 12 schedule, as I said earlier, has not been released yet for this upcoming year, but we do know the non-conference schedule at least for Oklahoma State, where we're playing Central Arkansas, which I'm going to count early as a W here, but maybe too early. We'll see. Then we go to Tempe to play the Arizona State Sun Devils, which we did beat at home this year, 34-17, but it was 2017 at one point in the fourth quarter. And then we play South Alabama, who we've played before. They're also USA because they're University South Alabama in Stillwater. So I kind of wanted to ask you like a whole win loss. We were setting this up. I figured that the Big 12 schedule will be announced last week sometime. There are a bunch of rumors that it was going to be announced last week. Maybe it'll be announced tonight before I even put out the podcast episode. But how are you feeling about next season, like a win loss record? I know it's just tough to speculate because there's four teams joining and we don't know who we're going to play at all and that type of stuff. But do you think we make it to a bowl game next year? Do you think we go 6-6, at least above 500?
Yeah, no, I think we do. I think we make a bowl game. I think it, man, it would be nice to take a look at an actual schedule and
Yeah.
we could count wins and losses. I'd like to think that we go 3-0 in the non-con. That game in Tempe could be a little tricky, especially if we, don't have everything rocking and rolling just yet with all the new players coming in. But I would, if I had to put money on it, I'm feeling another 7-5 season. I think Gundy he does have he does have a way of coming back. I mean, 2014 when everything looked like he was probably out the door. We were 5-6 going into that Bedlam game where we had really no business winning that game. But he wins. Go on to beat Washington in the bowl game in the Cactus Bowl, and then the next season we're 10-2, and we're back to being a Big 12 contender. I don't think Big 12 contender is realistic at all for OSU fans going into 2023. But I'm feeling a 7-5 season. I don't think, but I will say I think we're gonna to finish the season feeling a little bit more optimistic going into 2024. I don't think we're gonna have a 48-0 game. I don't think we're gonna get destroyed by Kansas. I don't think we're gonna. Well, hopefully we don't let OU get up 28-0 on us in the first 10 minutes of Bedlam. We'll see, but I think it'll be still kind of a mediocre season, but I think we'll feel a little bit better going into the next season. I think we'll make a bowl game. I think he'll extend that bowl streak to whatever it is, 17 or 18 at this point. So, what about you, Calvin?
Yeah, I feel the same. I think we'll be at 500 or better.